Hey,
Hello,
hi Karen.
how are you?
I'm pretty good.
Good.
You want to start with a check-in?
Yeah, okay. How are you? Tell us everything.
I had already two meetings today, and given that I started the day really early, I figured I get to do this call during working hours. So I was at the office at 7. And yeah, no, feeling good. Um, hmm. I had some really interesting calls yesterday. I had a call with my coach, and then in the evening I was on a call with a friend, yeah, you could say with two friends, but one is really like a feels like a friendship, and the other more like a work relationship in a way. Um, that was also very interesting. So I feel pretty alive already.
Good stuff. Um, so I'm just after finishing, I had my personal ceremony this weekend past. So that was intense, but really beautiful. Um, and because some of the other apprentices who are further on down the line, they had a 2 night ceremony. So we got to the younger apprentices that are only doing 1 night. We got to stay an extra night, which really I really felt the benefit of. Do you know what I mean? It was really nice to be able to kind of sit back and relax and not have to go out on ceremony, and just kind of sit around and uh, be in community with the other apprentices, which was really lovely. Um, and I was at beekeeping last night. Had a lovely beekeeping meeting, and I went swimming this morning and just out of the jacuzzi. So that's what.
That sounds incredibly relaxing.
Yes, it was. It really was. So, but the drive back was not relaxing because there was loads of road works, and I was kind of going, I'm going to be late. I'm going to be late. I've been really looking forward to this chat. So,
I almost want to immediately, put a pin in that when you said the drive back wasn't as relaxing because you had this impression or like this experience, I'm gonna be late, which somehow tells me about you as a person that you like to be on time whenever you meet people.
I think it's a matter of respect
Uh-huh.
that yeah, it's respectful to be on time. It's respectful to not have someone wait for you.
Hmm.
Now sometimes being late can't be helped,
Yeah.
and and
You're stuck in
and
traffic.
the universe puts things in your way to make you late. And sometimes the universe does that on, on purpose to make you late, to save you, or to make you see something from a different perspective. But um in my life, I have had people be late consistently, and it bothers me.
Hmm.
It Because I think it can be quite disrespectful.
Which brings me to my next question. So it seems then to me that the experience of respect, like coming from another person, would probably be something that you feel is like really important in a friendship.
Yeah.
Like, and can you speak a bit more about, because I find it even difficult for myself to say exactly, oh, respect is dot 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 exactly this. I clearly have an idea of what you mean, and I'm pretty sure anyone who will listen to this will also know, of course, I know what respect is. But then, yeah, like if you could just say a bit more about, like, because it's probably not just the to be on time, right? There's other
No,
aspects
there's more to
of
it than
respect.
that.
So what else comes to mind for you where both in the maybe specific to friendship, but more broadly, when do you feel disrespected by people, or like it's just not the level of respect that you would want?
I suppose that someone is putting a little bit of thought or forethought, into how they come across.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and how it feels from the other person's point of view. It's not something that you can actually put words on, but if I say something very disrespectful that I haven't thought about, and whoever it's aimed at, how it makes them feel.
So am I interrupting you? Do you more?
No, no. Ask
Um,
questions, Jochen, because you're
no,
in. These
no, like
questions are hard.
I'm I am really thinking this through right now, both with different situations going on within our community, within our crew at times. And just to give an example, um, so you, Karen, and I are part of a crew within Emergent Commons that meets once a week, where we try to have difficult conversations, I would say, like conversations about topics that are sometimes a bit harder to have. And my memory is that maybe 3 weeks ago, I brought up what I felt was just like not an innocuous, but like a, my perception about certain things put pretty objectively as I could put them. And yet one of the other people on the call, it was a bit too much for her. And then she was just like, yeah, because of my past experiences, I find this too difficult at the moment, and I'm just gonna leave the call. And that for me, now that I'm thinking about it and the way that you phrased it, maybe respect has a lot to do with knowing enough about the other person to be able to actually anticipate this would be something that is pissing the other person off in a way that they really don't like. And if I continually do that, where they have already told me, hey, that really pisses me off, and I still keep doing it, that for me would then be a sign of disrespect, right? Where, for instance, if someone meets you for the first time and they're 10 minutes late, and then you say, like, hey, um, whatever the person's name is, Peter, let's say, Peter, I really don't like it when people are late. And then a sign of respect would be, I think, if Peter says, oh, I will keep that in mind. And for future interactions, I will really do my utmost to be on time with Karen.
Mm.
Whereas, like, for other people, it may be about something else. Don't ever mention my mother, or do not talk to me about finances, or. And so I like that the way you put it. seems to suggest to me that respect is really not about like one specific behavior where you could say respect is doing this,
Yeah.
like concretely, but much more about respect means to understand what ticks someone off and then respecting that about them and trying not to break that kind of like understanding of what makes someone a friend is to not intentionally overstepping that person's boundary when you know that it hurts them.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really like that.
I think it's more about boundaries than anything else.
Uh-huh.
You know, and everybody's boundaries are different, and people have boundaries about different things, you know.
Yeah. Which brings me at least to the next question. At what point as a friend do you know that the other person's boundaries are some that you're supposed to push against? And how do you do this pushing in a way that is in line with friendship? Because I don't know, if I, for instance, imagine and hypothetically, um, I know that you have a habit of, let's say, just like, I don't know, whenever you're done using batteries in some kind of devices, you just dump them into your backyard. And I hypothetical.
Hypothetical.
To be very clear, you, Karen, are not doing that, to my knowledge. But then I learned this about you, and I bring this up, and then you're telling me, yeah, I really don't like it if you point out something that you think I'm doing wrong. And then I feel like, yes, part of respect would be not to talk to you about it, but then I may still really think, but I really do want to talk about it because I think in this particular instance, whatever is going on Karen's end, I really do want to push against that, right? Because so like, how do you do that with a friend?
Gently. Gently, and with a bit of respect, because I mean, if you consistently poke at someone's boundaries, that's going to either one piss the other person off, or they are going to not even take offense, but they are going to shy away from being in conversation with you whatsoever.
Yeah.
Like for example, okay, I don't like my birthday. Okay, I've never made any I've never hid the fact that I don't like my birthday. And my sister, who knows, because I'm 50 years old, she's 5 years older than me. So for the past 50 years, my sister would bring up my birthday, and I would say to her, I don't want to talk about my birthday because I don't like my birthday. And every year, without fail, what are you going to do for your birthday? And, you really should mark your birthday. And every time I say to her, I don't want to talk about this. And what do you want for your birthday? I don't want to talk about this. And now when she brings up my birthday, it literally, I can feel the hairs on the back of my neck standing up on end with absolute aggravation, because here I am, having stated my boundary time and time again, and this boundary is being consistently pushed on, not just pushed on, in some cases stepped all over, walked across, and had a party on the other side, you know? And I think that's very disrespectful, and I think it's very hurtful. And it would make me shy away from having conversations in regards to any of the things that I find, you know, close to my heart, big issues that I would find close to my heart, you know, that I don't trust with her.
And I want to be really intentional and careful now. Because I realize, no, like I realize you brought this topic up, and you're saying it is a topic, or it is at least something that has in the past been the source of some
Strain,
stress, tension. And so rather than talking about it with regards to birthdays or your birthday, I'm happy to take your example, but make it about something else as we continue the conversation, just because I realize I certainly don't want to, in our conversation right now, have it that you have a tense experience, right? I would rather have
yeah,
you have a relaxed experience, and then we talk, because let's for a moment imagine it wouldn't be about your birthday, but let's say about, I don't know, how you dress, or something that it could be about, where your sister gets involved in, where she has an opinion about, but where it is something that you actually feel very relaxed about, right? So that we can just keep the conversation about the issue without being about the very specific issue.
mm.
And so I imagine that, yes, whatever the precise reasons are that your sister is bringing it up again and again, I would at least assume that she does have a reason. And it could be that she actually wants to tease you. That, I'm not ruling that out.
I'm not ruling that out either.
And at the same time, I don't want to jump to that conclusion, certainly. And I'm even trying to understand now, is it like, I can imagine that for you, it would be important to know what your sister's reasons are, because at least maybe if you knew what the reasons are, it wouldn't be as aggravating. Is that something where you feel, for instance, if she did it out of the sense that, again, let's make it about clothing. She has a super strong sense of fashion. She has this feeling, I know everything about how someone could dress and make them look really splendid. And my sister is just not like really kind of up to the task. So let me keep giving her advice for what dresses to pick at the store. And your experience is just like, I don't care exactly how I look. I want to be comfortable in it. And so your sister keeps bringing it up because she thinks like, my sister would look so much better if only she dressed this way. And your sense is more like, I don't give a damn. I just want to be freaking comfortable in this thing. And so because there's different values, she kind of keeps pushing, but at least you would understand you're not doing it to piss me off, but you have just like a different experience around clothing. And would that make a difference?
Yes, I can see where you're going. However, from the beekeeping, we'll put it in this, okay? From the beekeeping point of view, you can't make a drone bee out of a worker bee. A worker bee is a worker bee, a drone bee is a drone bee, and not everybody can be a queen.
For sure.
Okay? And there are people out there, my sister being one of them, we'll put it that think they're the queen, and that they're trying to make the drone bees into worker bees and vice versa. And like out of you can't make someone do what you want because everybody's different, and not everybody thinks that fashion is for them. Everybody has their own style, and if you impress your opinion or impress your way of fashion on someone else, that's being a dictator.
Yeah. And so maybe briefly coming back to this concept of respect, I assume really part of basic respect is to ultimately understand that no matter how much you may want someone else to see the world from your perspective, and like at least be willing to look at the world, oh yeah, like great dresses are wonderful, and yet I choose not to live up to whatever you're thinking about the world. And then respect means to just say like, and I respect that.
Yeah.
Right? Where the other person's choices remain their choices. And so again, it's a very contrived hypothetical, but with the hypothetical of you dumping the batteries in your backyard, it might be that you tell me, yeah, I understand that you think batteries are toxic, but I actually found wherever I put the batteries, my plants grow better, and so fuck off, right? You are just giving me your experience of the world with regards to your own choices and behavior, and you're telling me, yeah, I understand that you have a different view on matters, and yet I choose to do what I choose to do, and in the end, it is none of your business.
Mm.
And for then a friend to at least say, I will not try to make you do as I think you should do, right? For it to be very clear that everyone is still their autonomous person, and it is not my role to shape you in a way that I want you to be.
I think with friendship, acceptance of who they are, who people, and knowing that you can only meet people where they are at, you know, and that it is not your place to change other people.
Mm-hmm.
It is your place to change yourself if you see fit, and only yourself. You can make
Oh,
suggestions.
this is fun now, because now I want to push back a little bit at least. So
You can make suggestions,
yeah, so
but we can't we can make suggestions with the caveat that we're not impressing our opinion on someone else. We can make suggestions, this might be a better way of doing things, or this might be a more environmentally friendly way of doing things, but I'm not going to force you to do it, and I'm not going to. And if you choose not to do it my way, I'm not going to give you a hard time over it, or I'm not going to give you the silent treatment because of it. I'm not going to go off in a huff.
um
Push back there, Jochen.
no, like because I do, let's say, if for instance, and this is something, where for the second time I'll get myself into hot waters. We're not with you, Karen, but like with regards to the state, both of emergent commons and the state of the world. um let me make the hypothetical, or like create a hypothetical that's not about emergent commons, to at least make the water slightly less hot. So I have a friend who's, and both my friend and I were members of a community. And I experienced my friend to do things within the community that where I really think they're bad for the community. Right? I don't know, like let's say um it's a physical community, and he likes to eat his food in public, but then keeps dropping, chicken bones or whatever just all over the place and doesn't pick them up. And the community clearly has some kind of culture that suggests no, everybody cleans up after themselves. And he is a dear friend, because outside of cleaning, not cleaning up after eating, he is a tremendously, like a fun person to be with, and everything else is, uh, um, great. But when it comes to his habit of like eating in public, it's really a mess. What to do? What to do with such a person? Um,
I think there has to be, especially within community, where we are sharing spaces, physical spaces with other people, there has to be a certain amount of self-responsibility for cleaning up one's shit. And I mean that both emotionally and physically.
mhm.
Um, and if someone is continually shirking their responsibilities, there has to be a kind way of bringing this up with said person and saying, other people have had to sweep up your chicken bones. Other people have had to clean up your crumbs or do your dishes so that they can be comfortable in their surroundings, which we share in community. And it really should, like something like that shouldn't be a big deal. And it shouldn't be left to one person either.
Yeah, I see. So the hypothetical with the chicken bones is probably still too easy to kind of like point at the difficulty that I see. And the difficulty is that people do all kinds of things where they leave behind in the public spaces a kind of imprint, like the chicken bones, that other people in the community don't want there. And if you don't know where I'm going with this, I'm thinking, for instance, and it is, it's such a hot button issue. I hope we won't get into like you're storming out on me, huffing in a moment. Like when I think of COVID, and you have some people in the community who say, well, you're going out, maybe not outside in nature. That to me really seems difficult to fully understand. But let's say into a supermarket, into a grocery store. You're going there, and you may have COVID, and by you being in the supermarket without a mask, or without being vaccinated, or without some precaution, or without taking a test and figuring out, do you have COVID? And then if you do, don't go to the grocery store, whatever. Some people in the community might say, that's irresponsible. You're leaving behind chicken bones. You're leaving behind your viral particles everywhere in the grocery store. And it is and I'm not suggesting you and I solve this on this call, because I think it is really a
We're not going
very difficult, it's a very
to.
difficult problem. But I suspect that different people also have different beliefs about where exactly to draw the boundary between the personal liberty that anyone has to say, no, 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 like the grocery store's for everyone, and I can go there. And you shouldn't have the right to, let's say, tell me whether or not to get vaccinated or to wear a mask or like to do this or that. Whereas other people, they feel, well, it's a communal space. And so whenever you enter a communal space, whatever the community writ large decides are the rules are the rules. And if they are only vaccinated people can go to the grocery store, then either get vaccinated or don't go to the grocery store, right? So I think different people would have different experiences around where to draw the line and how difficult it is to agree on where that line should be drawn.
Mm.
And unfortunately, one of my experiences, and so I want to come back to that question, is how to actually talk about that. Because, and you said gently, right? When talking to a friend and pointing out that with my values and my preference for where the line is to be drawn, I'm going to go to my friend and say, here's the line, do it this way. And we all, I think you and I can already agree that's a poor way of saying it. And what I'm actually seeking is almost like, so what's a better way to talk to a friend about where I think the line should be? And maybe after expressing that, at least having the hope that my friend can accept that at the very least, our preferences about the line and where it should be are different. And what it would mean for this friend to be, for me to be respectful of his preferences, but also for my friend to be respectful of my preferences, and how that conversation would look like.
Gently. So we'll go back to the chicken bones, because the chicken bones are not as controversial as COVID.
Yeah, indeed.
Okay. So if we were to approach the conversation by starting by, it pains me to say this. It pains me to say this, but the chicken bones strewn all over the floor quite upsets me, because I'm a vegan. Or, it pains me to say this, but I had to clean up your chicken bones to make this space a community space again, and not just a space for you. My boundaries were impressed upon because I had to, but in saying that, that's kind of, yeah, I do think that there is that whole, because some people aren't ready to be self-responsible. Some people, and it doesn't matter what age they are, everybody has grown up in a different way, and what I see as self-responsibility is not what you feel is self-responsibility. Everybody has a different way of seeing things. But to maybe try and see it from a higher perspective, or a bigger perspective, so that it's not into the nitty-gritty. It isn't about that one person. It's more about the community.
And so there's two incredibly important aspects in what you said. And I will still go with the first one that came to mind, which is really in the very, very first words that you said. You started with, "It pains me to say." And I like my very first response was like, oh, that's just like trying to make the blow less hard. But then I was thinking, wait a minute, there's some real wisdom in here. And I think the wisdom is not so much it pains me as in like, I wish I didn't have to say that. I mean, some people may mean it that way. And I'm not saying that, some people say, oh, it pains me to say, but, and then they will say something stupid. Like, it pains me to say, but you're an idiot. And in that case, I think they just mean it as this stupid, like initial to kind of like almost say, sorry for saying that, but
Yeah.
but I think there's a reality to it pains me to say, and that is I am aware that I will likely, with what I'm going to say, I'm likely going to overstep your boundaries. I will have a party on your lawn without your permission, but unfortunately, the only way of informing you of what I think to be is our cultural norms here is to get on your side of the lawn and like put in a little sign there that says like, you know, please don't leave your chicken bones elsewhere.
Yeah.
For you to see that, I have to actually step into your space. And that pains me because I
Yeah.
can already see we're likely going to get into hot waters here.
Mm.
And if I use it that way, and maybe like, oh, it pains me to say, is such a cliche phrase already that it's probably it may not be as helpful. So I'm trying to already think, how can I express to the other person this is going to be a difficult conversation here, but there's no way other than to have it.
Yeah.
And then to be very honest and say, what you're doing with your chicken bones. We have vegans here, and for them to be in a space where you're leaving around your chicken bones, this is not going to work, my friend. It's just not going to work.
Mm.
And however we're going to resolve this, you need to just also see the reality that this is not your place, right? You don't get to make the rules here.
Mm.
And so for me, part of friendship is, and as I spoke with Michael about it, is to probably wherever I feel that, and yeah, I think this is actually an important distinction for me. Do I believe that what I'm contributing to my friend is my preference, or is it just a fact about reality? Because those are two different things to communicate, right? If I'm telling my friend, my preference would be no chicken bones in the environment, and your preference is everyone can put their chicken bones everywhere they want, that is just like exchanging like, respective preferences. But I think the fact that whenever people live together, they need to come up with some arrangement that everyone can live with, that is not a preference.
Mm.
That is just a basic fact of life. And to the extent that we cannot agree on some plan, it's going to be impossible to live with one another in peace. And again, that is not a preference. I'm just stating a fact about reality. If you and I cannot agree on some version of events that you can live with in peace and that I can live with in peace, well, by definition, we will not be at peace.
Mm.
And so please, let's talk about how can we arrange this so that you are at peace and that I am at peace. And it is a difficult conversation, right? So I can preface this with saying it pains me to say, because we are going to have a tough time right now about your chicken bones. Okay. So I think this was really helpful for me to really clarify a number of things. One is the difference between communicating preferences and just my understanding of reality as it is outside of my preferences. And then to recognize that, yeah, the other person will feel accosted. They will likely feel accosted because I'm pointing out their behavior that they enjoy doing, otherwise they wouldn't be doing it, that from my perspective, either I or people in the community have some issue with, right? And that it will feel an assault on their boundaries because I'm pushing somewhere and that will be uncomfortable for them.
Mm.
And I'm recognizing that fact. So I think those are two really important pieces for me. But then as you kept going, there was still this piece about the higher perspective to take, and then how to take that higher perspective. Um, and I'm super happy to keep talking about that, but I also realized that aspect actually has not so much to do with friendship. So I'm also happy to say, when it comes to our conversation right now, I'm happy to just like go into anything that you find interesting to talk about with regards to how have friends influenced your lives, or how do, anything about friendship, really.
I think it's very interesting uh, how friendships can evolve and dissolve. And um and when we're in the dissolving part, how to do that not so much gently, because there is no gentle way of dissolving a friendship, but ultimately how to dissolve it without as much fallout. How to do it gently, how to do that, Jay. Yeah, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And this is the age-old question, I suppose. You know, how do you tell someone to fuck right off without saying fuck right off? Do you know what I mean? And it's interesting. My middle son has oppositional defiance disorder. So, and as Irish people, we saying no to someone is literally unheard of. I mean, and we're people pleasers. And it's not just an Irish thing. I will I will give the world that. But we, and I have, I'll hold my hands up and say it. I find saying no very difficult, and I find myself now at 50 years of age looking at my son's disorder as like a superpower, for the simple reason that when he says no, it's not personal. Do you know what I mean? He's not saying no to upset you. He's saying no because he doesn't want to do it. Now, sometimes he says no just to piss you off, and he will get joy out of it, But I think in a friendship, if we can receive no without taking it personally, that's a big plus for both people.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Yep. Given that you started with evolution and dissolution of friendship and then brought up your son, I'm curious if you have a question that you would like to inquire into. And it could be either around the no or how to learn how to live with the no, how to learn how to give no's, and how that ties in with the dissolution, maybe, or evolution of friendships. Because quite honestly, I can even imagine that there's a friendship where the people initially do not say no. And then one person at some point learns how to say no, and that breaks the friendship.
Yeah, well, I've
And
had
then,
that a few times.
and then the friendship actually evolves from there. Funny enough, because I like one of the things that I have come to understand, and that recording I haven't yet made public because it's still under review by one of my other friends, is my experience that a little bit like a romantic love that breaks apart. I think deep down, you always still have this kind of experience in your heart, like, oh, but I know them. Where, yeah, you're cross with them and you think like it's never going to work, but there's still a corner in your heart where, under the right circumstances, a little bit like a spore of a plant, it can just come out again and like grow. So
Mm.
my hunch is about that if a relationship breaks apart, including a friendship, yes, this is a sad state of affairs, but it is not necessarily the final state of affairs. So I can easily see that a friendship that has broken apart over this issue of no and how to give and receive it gently, how that can also be revived again.
Mm.
So, but I've I've spoken too much already. So, do you have any specific questions that you find juicy to inquire into with regards to evolution, dissolution, and like no's?
Not really. I just feel I feel at this time
Uh-huh.
specifically specifically with how the world is today.
Uh-huh.
I don't think this is the time to be the lone wolf anymore. I think we are at a time where we need to be in community. We need to be in a community that is listening, that gives space to all types of opinions, and gives space to support people even when we don't necessarily agree with said opinions. I do feel that communities that are nearly there are dragging the the parts of community that are nowhere near there, are trying to drag them along. And um and there's no question about it. It is, I feel, the state of affairs that we are at. And going back to, you can only meet people where they're at.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes dragging people along isn't beneficial for anybody. You get a pain in your shoulder, for one.
um, Yeah, that's it. That's a very tough one. And I think Michael and I touched upon this, is like when to make the decision that it is better to separate than to stay together and try to keep on dragging. Um, and I don't have the answer, obviously, you know, why would I have any answers, in fact? But my intuition is that there is indeed, and it seems natural to me, just like everything in nature can break,
Mm,
right? I am not aware of any material that is so communitarian on the molecular level that it cannot be broken apart. So there will always come the point at which things break. And given that that seems to be a fact about reality, why would this be any different about community or friendship? So I do think that there can come the conditions under which everyone in the community has to come to the resolution, okay, here's one person or here's a certain part of the community, and the forces that are working on us are so great that we would be better off as separate.
mm,
And that seems to be just a natural fact about the world that that happens. And so to have this thought, no, 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 we have to stay together, that for me would be trying to be unnaturally attached to community in that sense.
mm,
But that doesn't mean that the alternative is as soon as there's a little tension, let's go our separate ways, because that way we are like grains of sand without a container, right? And as soon as it like
mm.
wind blows, whee, they all go into different
Yeah.
directions and we can't hold together at all. So the for me, a good community is one that is more like, you know, like the grains of sand in a decent container, and whatever happens from the outside, let's say the grains of sand in a medicine ball, right? Where you can kick it and you can punch it, and the grains of sand will all stay in the ball together because it holds together. And then you need a pretty good, a decent knife to kind of poke a hole in it.
Mm,
So for me, a community functions a little bit like the skin of a medicine ball. It just keeps things together unless really something very extraordinary were to happen, maybe. But coming maybe back to the questions about the dissolution of friendship, and that you did bring up your son, I want to quickly at least ask, and it could be just either not interesting or too painful to talk about, but like maybe you brought up your son for the reason that it is actually sad how you see your relationship with your son as not as maybe close as you would like it to be. And but I don't know.
mm. We have a very close relationship, being honest with you. We really do.
That's wonderful.
Um, as I said, he has a couple of superpowers, you know, and from the outsiders, I suppose, looking in, he may come across as being someone who has a lot to deal with. He has autism, you know, he has this oppositional defiance disorder, and when he was younger, it was very difficult to comprehend, um specifically from a mother's point of view. Well, like, I mean, you know, as a mother, you would want to cajole, we'll say, or plumose, as a good Irish word, to plumose your child into doing whatever you want the child to do. Um, there was no plumosing. There was no amount of cajoling that I could have done, or persuading. And I'm very good at persuading. I'm very good at persuading. And because of my son, I'm even better at, at trying to persuade. But um, he has taught me so much about receiving no.
Mm-hmm.
From a very non-personal perspective. That, you know, he's not saying no. Well, sometimes he says no just to piss me off. But to see someone actually getting a bit of joy out of saying no, you know,
Which, just as a quick remark, my mother told me, and she passed away already, but my mother told me that it was one of the most exhilarating things for me as a I don't know, like 3, 4 year old at some point to discover this word. And then especially not just saying no, but to say not today. Where like my mom would like tell me, oh, like why don't you clean this up? And then I would say, not today. And even at this very moment, I can almost like reach back in time and be like, oh yeah, how delicious.
yeah.
How delicious to have discovered I can use just a couple of words to say gently, fuck off.
Yeah. 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 But I really admire that about him, you know. Now, as I said, it can be the most aggravating fucking thing ever. Do you know what I mean? He'd such an issue with footwear. He's a lot of with the autism. He's a lot of like sensory issues. So he will only wear certain types of shoes. So welly boots. Now, this is Ireland. It rains all of the time. Well, a lot of the time. And specifically when he was in like play school, kindergarten age. So 4-year-old. And this was before he was diagnosed. So he would not, for any reason, he would not put on welly boots. And this was the thing when they were in play school, when they went out, it was like muddy outside always, and it was one of the rules, you have to wear welly boots. And every day Craig wouldn't put on his welly boots today, every single day, and it became such a thing, and it would cause him to be overwhelmed, you know, this so it got to the stage where he would deny himself going outside and playing because he wouldn't put on welly boots, you know. So from the outside looking in, you're kind of going, well, just put on the, you know, it's easier to just to put on the welly boots, but in him, it would have been easier for everybody if we'd just said, you can go outside without the welly boots, you know. I don't really know what my point is.
So I can at least think of a number of points that I would draw from this. One is, and this to me certainly is one of the aspects I care most about. And that is, once you understand a person's inner experience around a boundary, around a rule, a behavior that is demanded of them, and you fully understand their inner experience, your own experience with their defiance typically changes a lot. Right? If someone tells you, I will not wear a mask, I will not wear boots, I will not pick up my chicken bones. And as soon as you fully understand what that person is going through as they're making that decision, your judgment of their denying to comply changes, typically.
Yes. Yes.
And how unfortunate it is that humans, either culturally or habitually, that is something I haven't figured out yet, are not in the habit of making that step. Like to ask, like, okay, someone does something I don't like, I explain to them the rules, and still they break the rule all the time. And I could at that moment say, okay, my appropriate course of action is to inquire into what is their experience with that. That could be what people do, but it is not, right? Instead, what happens normally is to say that's delinquent, that is criminal, because here are the rules. The rules have been explained to them. They understood them. You can even ask them, do you understand the rules? And they can repeat them so they know what they're supposed to do. And yet they're not doing it. And so they must be delinquent or criminal because they do not follow the rules. And I think that is our habitual experience with that, right? So that is just like what happens. And because we end it there, we will never get to the point of then still being able to, what you say, is to recognize, not so much maybe that it is a superpower, but that there's definitely no deficiency, right? But that it is just an expression of very, very strong held preferences.
Yes.
Where the other person is just like communicating in unmistakable terms, I will not follow that rule given how I feel about it. And yeah, like it really seems such a difficulty that we're having with that. The other point that I'm still drawing from what you said about your son is coming back to one earlier point, or like one earlier aspect, is that from the outside, a relationship can look very different than it is experienced by the people. Because I know of people who I would say are at each other's spiritual throats all the time, where I'm asking myself, why don't they break up? It really doesn't seem to be a lot of fun. But where for the people themselves, they might actually say, what are you talking about? We're having such a grand old time. And so clearly that the experience of a relationship, and especially a friendship maybe, it really more matters on what do the people actually feel about a relationship, right? So you said, I have a very close, and I took that also to understand, good relationship with your son. But where I can at least imagine that some people, especially when they see you and your son in certain circumstances, they may think, oh my goodness, they're really kind of at each, they're having at it. And yeah, like it really, and I think the two things are related, right? It is so easy for people to judge others with their own, perception and
Experience or
mindset.
perception, yeah.
Yeah. And which, at least brings me back to what you said earlier about just accepting how important it is to accept almost like the other person's version of events or version of experience. And that's really a very, very fundamental or foundational aspect, I think, of friendship.
I agree.
And then I still want to come back to the can of worms you opened with the dissolution, where you said, it can't be done gently, but you still want to do it gently. Maybe my question for you would be, what are the consequences of a friendship that dissolves? that make the process of dissolution such a difficult one? Because, you know, if all that, if the only consequence of a dissolving friendship would be, oh, this friendship is now dissolved and now we both can go on our ways and be happy with it, then that wouldn't seem such a problem, right? It would.
That wouldn't be a problem. But in my experience, there's an aftermath. In my experience, and fundamentally, I like to be liked. Fundamentally, you know, I feel I'm a good person. Fundamentally, I feel I'm a good friend. I do my utmost to be supportive. I do my utmost to create a space of trust. And in my experience, the aftermath can be the other person, and it might be their story, but if there's retribution, or if you know, that someone goes to another person in the friend group and badmouths you, or do you know what I mean? It's and there's nothing to be done, because, you know, I do have to take into account that their story is their experience and their truth, and if they are speaking from their point of view, obviously, you know, and, you know, from my heart, I'm not used to being the villain in someone else's story, but I am, you know, and there's nothing I can do about that. And as I have said in the past, you know, opinions are like assholes.
Yeah, everyone
Sometimes they're full of shit. And you know, we have to be able to sometimes take into account that we are the villain in other people's stories, and I don't like to be the villain.
Okay, this is now like getting into a very interesting direction for me at least. And this is almost bringing in one of the things you said very early on, right? I can't change other people, but I can change myself. And so how do I maybe not only accept, but almost gently, not too vigorously, but, you know, like embrace that fact that I am likely the villain in other people's stories. Not to derive pleasure from it, maybe, but certainly to
accept that part of myself,
reduce any kind of like disgruntlement that I have about my life, right? Where I'm saying, yeah, no, it's like every story needs a villain, I guess. And why would it be such an outrageous thing if I happen to be the villain in at least some people's story? Because I mean, it would be weird if in everyone's story it's like it's always the same villains. Even from like basic fairness perspective, maybe I should be the villain in some people's story. And not that I would have the immediate desire now to like increase the number of people in whose lives I am the villain. That might be a bad idea, but to just be very okay with that.
I think now that I'm that little bit older, that and I suppose I've done quite a bit of shadow work in my older years, that I can completely understand being the villain in someone else's story, and I'm okay with it now. Whilst 5 years ago, that would have been the worst thing in the world, you know. I think that it takes an awful lot of self-reflection to accept the villainous side of ourselves, to accept the shadow side of ourselves. And to not give it space, but allow it space.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like I don't want to feed it.
Yes.
But I don't have to suffocate it either.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. And I would at least say for me, looking at it properly, right, at that side that I sometimes do show in relationships that make it very unpleasant for the other person, where they may easily see, oh yeah, Jochen is really treating me very poorly at the moment. To at least consider that that is, in certain stories, just a necessary element of the story for development of that story, right? If the other person has never to contend with a villain, they may just not grow up. And if it is me who in that story needs to be the villain, so it's a semi-hypothetical, because I do have now on my team at work 2 junior people who, yeah, in the coming weeks and months will be evaluated, where then a decision is to be made whether to keep them around or not, right? And that evaluation, if it goes in a way where the decision is to be made, is made not to keep them around, yeah, I am a villain in that story, absolutely, because I contributed to the decision not to keep them around. Just like a teacher who gives you a bad grade, or like someone who you go to an exam, you sit an exam with someone and that person fails you, right? You are clearly, in that moment at least, the villain.
Um,
And of course, like maybe villain is a strong word, but you are at least a kind of emotional obstacle. You want something and the other person is keeping you from getting it. How dare they?
yes, but from the perspective of test or evaluation,
Yeah.
if you're not reaching the mark, you have to you not have to, but it is better to self-evaluate. Well, why?
No,
What is the reason why I'm not reaching
absolutely.
their mark?
And I think, Karen, that requires for a person to already have come to the point where they have integrated this basic fact about reality, that it challenges you and that it is your responsibility to grow up. Whereas if you think, oh, the way that I approached this exam, I should have passed. I spent a week preparing and I spent so much time and like I've done everything that I possibly could and I've still failed. What an asshole, right? So your perspective is actually in that moment limited, because you cannot see, or you are not seeing, that there is another perspective by which well, maybe you could have prepared in a different way, or maybe you could have asked other people to help you. Whatever you could have done differently, maybe there would have been a way to pass the test.
Yeah.
And you didn't. And so for me, the experience of villain often has a lot to do with whether or not I'm able to see that it is in fact a growth opportunity, and that can I see this from a different perspective, right? Just as, for instance, many years ago when I went through a breakup, and it was really, it felt terrible to me, and then the other person just no longer wanted to talk to me at all. Yeah, for a while I considered them as a kind of villain. But in fact, it was really, no, they were like providing me with the opportunity to grow and say, I can accept that no. Right? And so that for me is this shift that is possible, right? And so I'm now fully accepting that, yeah, like sometimes people may certainly for a while see me as a villain, but it is just necessary to provide other people also with opportunities for them to outgrow that.
Yeah.
And of course, that's why I'm saying I don't want to feed that, right? Because I don't want to intentionally become obstacles in other people's lives just for the fun of it. That for me would be cruel. So where in addition to the villainous aspect, to the challenge aspect, it's like a cruelty aspect where it's just like, let's make life as hard as possible for other people for no good reason. And so for me, it's really about, do I understand that this aspect of being the challenge, the villain for people is useful, and where, you know, like with what's the movie that the Disney movie that flopped, Snow White, right? Where the evil queen provides Snow White with this opportunity to get her act together and figure shit out about herself, and then be like, no, let me be like this strong character who is able to not get put underground by this other thing in my life. And of course, the evil queen, I wouldn't say I want to be the evil queen for everyone, right? Because that seems cruel. But to the extent that I make choices and I feel that's a good choice, and someone else experiences me as the evil queen, but they ultimately get over that, and they grow and become a much more powerful person that is able to deal with that, I would say win-win, right? And so for me, it's much more about learning how to deal with this experience of there's a villain in my life as, wait a minute, wait a minute, wait a minute. Why not just flip the script around and say, that's just a growth opportunity. How do I become more powerful so that that no longer bothers me? And I'm not saying you can do that with every villain.
I don't think you can do it with every villain.
Like
No.
if the bank comes after you for a late mortgage payment and says, okay, one more week and we foreclose your house, that may simply be a challenge too much for you to ever be able to deal with, right? So it is very obvious also that there are villains in a description of villains where the challenge that they offer to people is just way beyond their capacity for growth.
Yeah.
And so for me, it's really about understanding also that as I'm looking into this villainous aspect of myself, that I at least have a clear understanding at what point am I overtaxing people's ability for growth. For instance, in the relationship with my husband, yeah, there are aspects where I still think he offers growth opportunities for me and I offer growth opportunities for him. But to do this in a way where, yeah, momentarily we are each other's villains. Like, God damn it, why do you have to do that to me again? And as long as we're doing it in a way where, you know, we're leveling each other up over time, I think that's desirable.
But that takes an awful lot of self introspection and growth, time, and consideration, and I think more than anything, self-compassion and forgiveness.
Oh yeah,
And
yeah.
yeah,
All of the above.
all of the above. And like a lot of people are just not there. You know, they're just not ready to be able to say, okay, I can forgive myself for that. You know, I mean, one of with my recent trip to Australia to see my sister, I was really hopeful that it would mature our relationship. That, you know, we haven't spent any time with each other as adults. In it really, do you know what I mean? Yes, we've had phone calls, and you know, and we would talk to each other 3 and 4 times a week for a couple of hours. And before I went out there, and I was discussing with other friends, and I was kind of saying, Jesus, I was such an obnoxious teenager. I was quite the little bitch at times. Do you know what I mean? And after spending 2.5 weeks with my sister, I really forgave from a very deep level. I forgave my obnoxious teenager, because that girl did what she did to survive, and and had I not had the experience of 2 weeks with my sister, I still wouldn't have forgiven that obnoxious teenager. I wouldn't have understood from that deeper level why I needed to forgive that obnoxious teenager. So whilst I'm still licking my wounds in a very big way, I'm very glad I went. And I'm very glad I experienced the hell that she put me through. Yes. So I do think that I do think there is a lot of that the world at large needs to forgive themselves quite a bit. Now, and I'm not saying that everything needs to be forgiven. There is some things that are unforgivable in this world, but I do think that most people are incredibly hard on themselves, and most people could learn to be more compassionate to others, but mostly to themselves.
I'm now torn between following up on the how to develop self-compassion and forgiveness. And one of the things that you said about before taking the trip to Australia, that you spoke with friends. And where I do recognize I've done this on quite a large number of occasions, where I've had an experience with one person I'm in relationship with, and it could be a friend, it could be my husband, it could be just an acquaintance, it could be also someone at work. And I didn't know exactly what to make of an upcoming interaction where I felt, yep, I will see or speak with this person soon, but I am still so uncertain how to approach this in a productive way. And then being able to talk to other friends about that has indeed always been very opening for me. And I'm not saying that I've gained a lot of insight about like what exactly to say, but that I certainly gained a lot of compassion for how I really felt about the situation, because I could already with another person unpack that aspect. Here's how I actually feel. Here's why this is so depressing or anxiety inducing or whatever. Here's what I fear might come out of this. All of these aspects I could just like lay on the table, and then have another friend just like look at them and be like, oh wow, that really that's a full package you have right there to deal with. And that response very frequently has made it then much, much easier to have the actual conversation and meeting with the person that was about. Because I had already loosened up. And that for me is almost the magic that can happen, right? That it loosens the soil sufficiently to then actually plant something that can grow. Whereas like, if you have like a really hard piece of soil and well, try to put some seeds on it and water, the
Nothing
birds
happens.
the birds will come and eat the seeds, and you're like, oh my goodness, everything is lost, right? So like typically I feel the first thing that needs to happen is to loosen the soil. And I have found that friends are among the best environment where their spacious reflection can just
Yeah.
help me. Oh my goodness. Yeah, like, oh, I can stretch here. I can feel more air coming to all of these parts that haven't seen daylight in years,
Hmm.
and to make that a much easier process.
I have a couple of friends that like in those moments of overwhelm, I feel I can literally vomit all this shit out and say, blah, blah, blah. Do you know what I mean? This is this is exactly how I'm feeling. And throughout that, I'm I'm puzzling out my own shit. Do you know what I mean? And I'm able to compost it for myself, you know? Um, and these particular friends, they don't really, it's not that they offer opinions, they act as the sounding board. And sometimes they do give me really fantastic advice. I'm not saying that, they're just taking it all in and saying, yeah, you deal with that yourself, you idiot. Do you know what I mean? But a lot of the process is actually the verbalizing of all these, deep, dark secrets that I don't want, that I would find difficult to admit to anybody else. But because of the support and love and acceptance of those people, I feel safe enough that I can do the work without feeling like the victim, or without feeling like the villain, or that I have the ability to give it enough space to see it from that higher perspective.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I thank God, Jesus, Mary, Joseph, and the Holy Donkey for those people in my life, you know?
As I bring to mind some of the people that I can immediately think of who have played that role for me, yeah, my heart just fills with gratitude, joy, warmth. It's just like so much, like lying on the beach at a perfectly temperature day, with just the right amount of sunlight, the breeze, maybe a cocktail with an umbrella.
Oh.
Like it's really the perfect experience, the perfect environment to just, you know, and then of course there's something to be done at the beach, right? So it's not just like the relaxation, but you can actually go out and explore while feeling it's the perfect day.
Mm.
And yeah, I certainly hope that I am also friends a friend to people who experience me in that way, just because I can tell how much my life is richer and more integrated. I just no longer feel as fragmented in
Mm.
my experience, but all of the aspects that make up my that contribute to my consciousness, they're no longer quarreling as much with
Mm.
one another. And that is just fantastic because moving through life in this integrated fashion is just much, much easier.
Mm.
Because I'm no longer, like it's a little bit if you have two legs that are controlled by two different parts of the brain, and one wants to dance and the other one wants to like just like walk somewhere. And like the movement that you'll make is like it gets you somewhere, but it's like it's very clumsy and like you'll fall a lot or
Around in
whatever.
circles.
And whereas like once you get those two parts that control the left and the right leg to be like, oh yeah, let's just agree to get somewhere and then let's have a dance over there. Much easier. Much easier.
Mm. Yes.
Um, and right now I'm trying to still like see is there anything on the canvas of friendship related matters, topics that comes to mind as put the focus of attention on that. And or is there anything where you still feel worth looking at?
I don't know. Well, it's not something that you can grade, really, is it? Friendships, you know, it's you have good friends and you have friends that like, I mean, I have friends that uh we mightn't see each other for 6 months and we might have, you know, a couple of texts. Or I've one particular friend that, from for 6 months of the year we will literally just send each other stupid little videos on Instagram. Do you know what I mean? But then when we get together, it's like there was no separation, and we literally kind of pick up where we left off. And there is that really strong feeling of support. And I know when the chips are down, that person, um not in my face, but she's got my back,
Mhm.
you know. And if I was to ring her at 4 o'clock in the morning in a state of overwhelm, she would be so there for me. And if I won the lotto in the morning, she would be so there for me. And I have other friends that I know I couldn't do that with, but I still consider them friends.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, they're definitely also in my life, you know, friends of very different qualities
Yeah.
where, you know, and I would be hard pressed to say, like, I wouldn't want to trade and say, you know, if I could choose, if I had to choose this friend but not that, like that sounds terrible
Yeah.
because it is just different aspects of life that they contribute to.
Mm.
Where some friends really feel much more like to bounce ideas off or to just like, you know, have a good time with.
Mm.
That is a very, very important part of my life, right? So I wouldn't just like say, oh, if I only had the friends who help me out of problems, then I have enough friends or something. No, no, no. I want like I need, I think, people in my life who clearly contribute to it in a way where it creates this fabric or tapestry of experiences. And like my life would be much, much poorer without th those friends as well.
Mm.
So I wouldn't want to trade them or even prioritize them. And luckily, I it is certainly my experience with friendship in general that it is not necessary, right? You can have very different quality friends.
Mm.
And I also no longer I think there was a time in my life where I felt some kind of I wouldn't say irrational, but maybe unhealthy or unnatural desire to try to develop every friendship into this direction of like, let's be close friends or something. Just because I felt, well, closer is better. Or, you know, where friends who I could talk to at 4 in the morning, right? Wouldn't it be great if all of my friends I could talk to at 4 in the morning? But the flip side is if everyone did that with me, I would have like at some point 50 people, 100 people who think they can call me at 4 in the morning.
Mm.
that, that sounds like a terrifying prospect.
Yeah, yeah. I turn my phone off at 10 o'clock now.
Don't tell that to your friend who you want to call
I don't
in the
know.
morning.
Yeah, that does sound quite terrifying. But you know that there is those handful of friends that you would be there for. And
Yeah.
even those ones that are not as close, you would probably answer that phone at 4 o'clock in the morning.
To the extent that I wake up from the vibration,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah, me too.
Um, no, in fact I would go so far as to say anyone that I consider a friend, even a fairly remote friend, like someone who, you know, like if that person, if I became aware that that person either by asking me or even just like becoming aware of it, is either asking for my help or could use my help. Yeah, I generally feel a desire to at least to consider, is that something that I could give and that I want to give, and that by giving it, it makes my life richer and the other person's life richer or better, you know? Um, but you know, maybe if you still want to explore that, that for me is sometimes a very difficult question to actually answer, right? Is me giving something to a person like a resource or, you know, And it doesn't have to be a material resource like money or an object, but even like saying, hey, yeah, like I know someone, let me connect you to this person, right? That's a resource. And the question, is it good for the other person if I do that? Because that's a tough question. Because sometimes I think it is better for people to learn to develop their own resources. And sometimes it's really best to just like give something, ideally maybe with the idea that the other person also learns to grow that type of resource for themselves. And of course, then there are things that where it's just like a practical, it's more like a service where if someone asks me, hey, can you help me move houses or something, right? Where the the whole point of them asking is they can't do it themselves by themselves, right? So that's like that there in that situation, it might be different. But yeah, like, sometimes people ask you, like if you have a neighbor, let's say, and you're friends with your neighbor, and the neighbor comes 3 times a week. Oh, I ran out of eggs. Can I borrow some eggs? Sure, here's some eggs. And the next day, I ran out of this. Can I borrow this? And like, not even borrow, but like, can I, and at some point you have to tell the person or ask, like, do you know where the grocery store is? I just want to figure that out with you because like I am not the grocery store. And so to at some point understand, yeah, like giving people resources feels great and is probably an act of kindness and friendship. And wouldn't it be also like at some point necessary for the person to figure out how to deal with certain situations on their own?
Well, so what this is bringing up for me is the unconditional love kind of, and are we giving something to receive something? Am I giving you this present because I want to receive your gratitude and I want you to go out and say, oh, Karen did this wonderful thing for me, and isn't Karen amazing? You know? So I think, well, one, it would depend on what it is you are giving and what sort of value you are putting on the thing that you are giving away. And also, are you giving this with a condition of wanting to receive something?
Mm-hmm.
So my neighbor is in her late 80s, and I mean, she's absolutely brilliant. If you ever want to know any gossip in the she very rarely leaves her house. How she finds out all the gossip, I'll never know. But the gossip just lands in her lap, and she gives the gossip away. Okay. And the fact that I would call into her, or if we'll say if the electricity goes, and I, will go in and just make sure everything is okay with her, she will never forget that, and she will tell anyone who listens that Karen Minchin, her next door neighbor, is the best neighbor you could ever get. Okay. But she'd never asked me for anything,
Mhm.
you know. Yeah, but then there's other people that, you know, that I'm the worst in the world. Like the woman across the road thinks that I'm a witch. And she wouldn't be wrong.
Yeah, because I was just about to ask, are you?
Very much so. um, but I think she's actually not that she would be fearful of me, but she would be wary of me,
Mhm.
you know. So what one person, obviously, because everybody's different, what one person sees of you and what another person sees of you are two totally different things. Yeah.
And in a way, I've come to think of what you just described as actually a very wonderful fact of life. Because I wouldn't want to be seen as the same, not boring, but like if everyone saw me exactly the same, that would feel very boring because like
Boring.
everyone would also like more or less treat me the same. It's just like I don't want that.
Yeah.
I'm really happy that some people respond to me with enthusiasm and other people leave me well alone.
Mm.
Because otherwise I would either have to dance with everyone or with no one. And either sounds like terrible arrangements.
Depends on how good a dancer you are.
One of the calls I was on yesterday, I would I would describe is primarily kind of like not maybe a dance school so much as like a not dance academy, but like it certainly points out to me where I have still growth to do when it comes to my dancing abilities. Yeah. And that's a lot of fun for me. Even though the calls are sometimes a little they do take quite some
Brain power.
brain or like hard power whatever. They you know. Uh um but yeah, I've learned so much there and I've expressed to the friend who hosts these calls just how much I appreciate that he does so and that he allows me to just, like show up and learn.
Hmm.
But yeah, what you said, like I certainly cannot push away the notion that yes, each time I give, somewhere in my experience, I am also getting something. And my question is maybe mostly about, am I aware of what it is that I'm getting? Because here's the thing, if I am giving for the specific purpose, let's say, of then being talked about by the community for having given it, then I think it is at least the most healthy that I can say I want to own that.
Hmm.
And then, for instance, I can say, I'm giving $5,000 to our community, Emergent Commons, for getting a license of this thing, and I want one of the rooms on the website to be called the Jochen Weber Memorial so-and-so thing, right? Like, let's just say,
Yeah. Yeah.
because at least then I own it.
Yeah.
But if I do it for that reason, but then I just hope that people will talk about me or whatever, and then that doesn't happen, I may get really pissed off, right? And so for me, I think it would just be important to become fully aware. Why am I doing it?
Yeah.
Because if I don't like that reason, I may want to think about whether I want to give it at all.
Yes. And I think that's a big hole that we fall into, or if someone isn't as grateful as we would like to be,
Exactly,
or
right?
if they don't, not if they don't show gratitude, well, if they don't show gratitude, but if we don't see the gratitude in the way we would like to see it.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? If the gratitude but then we have there's this yeah, we're putting our conditions on their gratitude, you know. I mean, we can tie ourselves up in knots about these things,
Yeah.
you know.
And I would at least say I've had in the past very only a few limited experiences, but where I have received something and I felt that I showed the gratitude as I wanted to show it. But then I think the other person was like, they were hoping to get something else, but they didn't tell me that. But then they were still pretty pissed at not getting what they what they wanted. So like, yeah, that's at least it's a dangerous game to play.
Yeah.
If you give something to people and then they don't respond with the kind of gratitude you want, and then you take that as a reason to be cross with them, especially if you haven't told them what you want.
Yeah. I think that happens a lot more than we expect it to,
Oh yeah.
or that we even give credit to.
Yeah.
You know
No,
what I mean?
if for instance someone like you tell someone, yeah, yeah, I'm flying there and there, and the person says like, oh yeah, I can drive you to the airport. Okay. So drives you to the airport, you go on your trip, you come back, and then the person a week later comes, oh, can you help me with this? And you say, no, I don't really have time. And then the person says, yeah, but like 3 weeks ago, I drove you to the airport. Yeah,
These are
okay,
the
okay, okay.
conditions.
So,
These are conditions that we put on our friends and ourselves.
and so yeah, it's it's tricky.
Mm.
And I can immediately see again that this is also probably an aspect of human, like the difference of human experience across people, where, yeah, for instance, for my husband, for him, the experience of the aspect of fairness is much, much more important. Like this kind of very equitable treatment, kind of, is much, much more important than it is for me. So just, to tell you, like for me, for instance, I would be totally fine having a friend where a lot of resources flow from me to this person, and like whatever comes back is literally just thank you. That is all that comes back. For me, that can be a friendship.
Mm.
It might not be necessarily where I want to have 100 friends like this,
Mm.
but to have one or two friends like this, absolutely okay. Right? But I think for my husband, that would be like a terrible and terrifying, even hypothetical, because he would feel bad about that on some very, very deep, deep down level where I wouldn't want to argue with him about like why that is a bad, like, like why am I right and he's wrong or something. No, it's just like that is his experience. It would be his experience that would be a terrible friendship, I guess, right? And I recognize that there are other names for relationships, right? If I imagine, for instance, I'm someone's honorary uncle, where, yeah, as an uncle to a nephew, it is really much more natural that the resources flow that way
Mm.
than rather than the other way around, right? Where the nephew supports the uncle constantly. And so maybe like I can also appreciate that for my husband, the word friendship is just when it comes to a certain flow of resources, has this quality. No, it should be equitable. That's a friendship, period. And so I can even understand that the word friendship itself is just maybe not sharp enough so that everyone who uses the word necessarily understands exactly the same thing by it.
Well, I think in most relationships, the idea of I water you and you water me is equitable, to use that framework. But sometimes I don't have water. And sometimes my cup is empty.
Yeah.
And I feel very blessed that, when my cup is empty, my good friends will see Karen's cup isn't flowing. I'm going to pour into Karen for a minute, and like that, when my friends are having a hard time or going through a bigger process, I'll flow into them. And sometimes flowing into them is just giving them space,
Mm-hmm.
you know. Um I do think there with the better relationships, there's a lot of I don't know the word I want to use here. Not that there's a knowing of the person, a better knowing of the person. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it also depends on the relationship. Like as you were saying, an uncle and nephew, like yes, the resources might be flowing from one to another now, but who knows in 40 years' time that flow might be reversed. You know?
But at least I can tell you that to the extent that I have honorary nephews or I am an honorary uncle to people, it certainly wouldn't be my expectation.
Mm,
Right. And if that was my expectation, then again, I need to own it.
yes.
Right. So
Yeah.
for me, it's really about the awareness of
Mm,
the if I want something to be explicitly transactional, then I need to make it explicit. And if I have it just implicitly transactional, that is to say, I have this notion of like, oh yeah, yeah, at some point I'm gonna get something back. But the other person doesn't know about that. They have a very hard time ever living up to that expectation.
yeah, yeah.
And if they at the beginning want to already say, no, no, that sounds like a weird expectation for you to have, then that should be clarified at the beginning, which
But
is,
these are I'm not going to say social contracts, but these are the contracts that we have,
yeah, yeah.
which sometimes we don't have a whole lot of honesty with ourselves
Mhm.
about.
Yeah, yeah.
And our core truths, we're not very good with knowing what they are sometimes.
And it's certainly easy for me to fall into the trap of starting to think, oh, I don't need anyone. which
Well, that's a big lie.
yeah, no, exactly.
Yeah.
Right. Because maybe right now for the next hour, I don't need anyone. Sure. But to be very, upfront about it, yeah, there will certainly come a time in my life where if if not someone is taking care of me in some shape or form, my life will be misery,
Mm.
right? And so what really is my approach of just like negotiating with that reality? Because I can't avoid that. I mean,
Mm.
I can at some point say if it gets too bad, I commit suicide or something, right? I can, like, but outside of like very extreme choices I could make, I will just have to face that reality at some point.
Mm.
And so for me, there, I would say friendship is primarily, yeah, an interplay. It's really this kind of recognizing each other's needs and preferences, and which you call knowing, right? This knowing of what the other person needs, and to have a kind of signaling with one another of, wouldn't it be great if we felt we can build some kind of faith or trust or relationship by which we just signal to one another, we recognize each other's needs, and to the extent that it feels good contributing to your needs, I'm going to do that.
Mm.
I will not give to you when it feels bad to me, when I myself don't have enough. Then it's just like, please don't ask me then, because that would feel difficult. Or at
Mm.
least we would then have to have a conversation. But to the extent that I can easily give, absolutely, as I become aware of your needs, it's going to be such a pleasure.
Mm. Yes, because giving is good.
It
It's
is.
nice to be able to give.
It is absolutely, yeah. To that's, I think, why people want to have pets. It really feels good to care for a creature. Even just like this experience of like feeding a creature, or like petting a creature, or like making sure the creature has a home. All of that feels good.
Until the creature decides to chew everything that surrounds it.
Yeah, no, exactly. And so like and similar to the relationship with a pet, and no, friends are not pets, but there is this overlap in, you have to be honest about it.
Yeah.
Because you wouldn't expect the pet to be your therapist. At least not in the sense that it
Well,
talks back.
there
Maybe,
are so many dogs that have been therapists for
maybe, maybe by virtue of not saying anything. Sure, sure. You can talk to the dog and the dog won't say anything. Exactly.
Hmm. I can tell you, my dog knows my deepest, darkest secrets, and I know his. He doesn't make any secret of his deepest, darkest, let me tell you.
Where he has already kind of chewed and pooped and whatever. Yeah. You know his darkest secrets.
He's going around at the moment with this stick that looks like a pipe. So so it's a long stick with a pipe thing out of it, and he's going around with it in his mouth, and I just like, it looks ridiculous. And one of my sons took the pipe off him and threw it into the tree, and it got stuck. So then the dog sat and barked at the tree for about an hour in the hope that it would fall down. I don't know. So,
Well, I'm more thinking calling a friend who can bring it back.
well, we tried to throw a rake up to get the stick down, and now the rake and the stick are stuck in the tree.
That can
The
happen.
dog needs a therapist now.
Yeah, sometimes you call a friend and the friend will make it worse.
Yes, yes. You know
You have
that
you have to be aware of that possibility.
what's that? Who wants to be a millionaire or whatever it was? What friend did you want to call? Make sure the friend knows the answer. Phone a friend.
Yeah, I'm just quickly glancing at the time. We have been at it for about 2 hours. Um,
Time flies when you're having fun, Jochen.
oh, Karen, this has been tremendous fun. And again, like there are definitely pieces where as I will read the transcript in preparing for putting this online, and of course I'll send you the recording for review as well. I'm sure that rereading what we spoke about, I will have again flashes of like, oh yeah, nugget here, nugget there. Like this is great. And that for me is to a large extent why I want to have these conversations. It's really for me to yet more deeply understand ultimately maybe how to be a good friend.
Mm.
What is it that I can really do in this world to manifest good friendship?
Mm.
Because I do believe to the extent that I'm doing that, if I'm in my 70s, 80s later and I look back on my life and was like, yeah, like I nailed friendship. I think all the rest, I think I can live with.
Mm. Yeah. Yes, to be able to sit in your 80s, or at any time in your life, and to be able to truthfully admit to being a good friend is something to be not be proud of, but um it's very nourishing.
I like my the words I would use is like for me a life well lived.
Absolutely. And this is one of the things that kind of shocked me, I suppose, when I was in Australia, is the difference between consuming and nourishment, and how we can easily consume. Consuming is easy, but nourishment takes a little bit of work. Um, and consuming can be very surface, whilst with nourishment you kind of have to dig deep,
Yeah.
you know, and you have to look inwards to feel like you're being nourished completely. What is it that I'm going to feel nurtured in this moment, without just take, you know um yeah. I found Australia quite on the surface, that even the gold seeps up through the ground, and these big nuggets of gold, you know came to the surface, you know and everything was beautiful and fancy, but it wasn't exquisite, you know that yeah, there's a there's a depth there's a depth that I felt was missing, you know but then, even in my conversations with people, like I like to dig deep, you know I like, because you know, the real gems come with a bit of hard work. You know, diamonds are made under pressure, you know, otherwise they're just coal. You know? Now, coal is very useful.
Yeah.
Diamonds are a whole lot prettier. Yeah. I do really value you know, a good deep conversation, something that you can feel nourished by, you know. That's not, it's not liked by a lot of people. A lot of people find getting deep down and dirty uncomfortable.
Yeah, I suspect that it requires the looking maybe not at villainous aspects, but certainly at aspects of our experience that are not as pretty for a while.
Uh, uh.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, yeah, I don't know how you feel about still keep going. I would have a little more time, or I'm also happy for now, Karen, to really say this has been really a fantastic conversation. I feel nourished.
I feel very nourished. Thank you very much. And I actually have to physically nourish my children before they before before they start consuming all the goodies that are in the press. Dinner of biscuits does not sound nourishing. And I really want to thank you for inviting me on. And as I said, when you first asked, I really appreciate your I really appreciate the fact that you are posing this inquiry in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's something to be valued, and that you are taking this time to pose this inquiry, you know, and the energy that you are putting to it. And I've thoroughly enjoyed it, and I thoroughly enjoy your friendship and your opinion and the love and time that you put into all of our conversations. So big hearts to you, Jochen.
Karen, thank you so much. And I will see you hopefully next week again during our
Yes,
regular call.
yes, lovely stuff. Yes, I completely missed last night. Beekeeping went on a whole lot longer than it was supposed to, and then I had my lawnmower being collected to be serviced. So it was a stupid o'clock at night, but anyway, yeah, and it was like 11:10 last night, and I was kind of, oh God, I'm supposed to be in a call right now. Oh, I'm not going on now. It's 11 o'clock at night. Nobody will be there. So thank you. Lots of love to you. I will see you soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye now.